Our final and keynote speaker is a hardcore engineer who is part of the team that built the Mars Curiosity Rover. Brett Kennedy is currently the supervisor of the Robotic Vehicles and Manipulators group at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. Seeking the bleeding edge of mobile robotic applications, Brett has worked the last 15 years at JPL on diverse systems, the most immediate being the robotic arm aboard the Curiosity Rover, which is currently patiently waiting out the solar conjunction on Mars. To tell you about science fiction becoming science fact, please welcome Mr. Brett Kennedy.
Thank you very much. All right, an engineer and a science fiction writer walk into a bar. The bartender looks up and he says, drinking alone again. So, clearly it's a good thing that I showed some aptitude for engineering because I was never going to make it doing stand-up. And as awful as the joke may be, it actually encompasses much that I believe to be true. That the divide between my kind of engineering and science fiction writing is not so large. It's relatively easy to find examples of people who cross that divide. However, I wanted to explore the idea a bit more as well, using the recent experiences of the Mars rover Curiosity as a touchstone. As is customary, I'd like to call on the words of a luminary to motivate. There are many good examples, but it seems particularly appropriate on the occasion of the Writers of the Future Awards to use the opening line from L. Ron Hubbard's To the Stars. Space is deep, man is small, and time is his relentless enemy. Written as they were in the nascent days of science fiction and before there was such thing as engineering fact concerning space travel, these words still ring true not just for today's science fiction writer, reader, and artist, but also for humankind and its continuing quest deeper into space. And why do I believe this to be true? I do not profess to know the original intent of those words, but as one of the wonders of writing and reading, they were able to look at all creative works through the lens of our own experience. This is how I interpret those words relative to our today, howsoever they were originally intended to address our tomorrow. Space is deep. Simply, there is so much to explore, so much to do. And our inner space is just as rich as our outer space. All of that gives writers and engineers an effectively infinite playground. Man is small. We are small in so many ways, yet giant in others. We are physically small relative to the natural forces around us. We are also small when we stare at our feet rather than scanning the skies. We focus on our bodies, our immediate circumstances, our next day, our next paycheck. Writers and engineers must have a will to confront this tendency. We must both accommodate its reality and transcend its comfortable confines. And time is his relentless enemy. Humans are no smaller than when confronted with their allotment within the span of time. For those who wish to transcend the current boundaries of human achievement, the greatest enemy is the time with which we have to work. Again and again, we see that the well of creativity does not run dry. It is the human body or the vagaries of civilization that fails it. Therefore, there must be an urgency to see our contribution through. There is so much to do, and we must have a will and an urgency to see it through. So let me step down off of my soapbox and give you an example from NASA's most recent foray to Mars, the Mars Science Laboratory, or Curiosity as we call it. I offer it on behalf of the more than 4,000 men and women who have directly contributed to this mission. So as we start, I'd like to translate the legalese you see on the screen into something far more practical. It is a thank you to the American taxpayer who sees this work as a worthy investment in the country and in humankind. It is also appropriate to acknowledge the international contributions to the science instruments and the engineering elements aboard the rover. Okay, so the most obvious statement is that we sent a rover to another planet. So, it is safe to say that space is now a little less deep, man is a little bigger, and time's pressure has been eluded, if only for a moment. And here is a portrait of Curiosity in its new home. Over the last 15+ years, we have moved from a rover the size of a microwave, Sojourner, to ones the size of small dining tables, Spirit and Opportunity, to one the size of a small car. More importantly, we are shrinking Mars by sending a rover that is designed to live longer, drive further, and carry more science instrumentation than its predecessors. These capabilities will be bent upon finding evidence as to whether Mars was once habitable. To this end, Curiosity was landed in Gale Crater via a method that looked pretty Wile E. Coyote, but was the result of countless hours of design and analysis. But even at that, it yielded what we engineers call the 7 minutes of terror. Once in Gale, the rover was to investigate its environment in a new way. For the first time, we were going to drill into solid rock in order to retrieve pristine samples to feed laboratories housed within the rover itself. And with a path so smooth that it had many of us knocking superstitiously on wood, we proceeded to do just that. At the target known as John Klein, the first holes were drilled into Mars, which you see here. The main hole yielded about 14 cubic centimeters of rather unremarkable-looking gray material, which was displayed in here in the scoop to Curiosity's cameras during the preparation phase. So that's about enough material to fill a teaspoon. However, it is more than enough to satisfy the appetites of the analytical instruments inside the rover. Those instruments baked and bounced those samples until they gave their secrets up as to their composition. Rather than dead red of every part of Mars that we've been able to access previously, this gray material was not only a clay mineral that would have formed in the presence of fresh water, it also held various compounds that would have been useful to life forms as we know them. That is, of course, if such life forms ever existed on Mars. Armed with this information, scientists are willing to hypothesize that the Curiosity landing site is in fact an ancient freshwater body fed by the river or stream seen in the upper left of this orbital image. This wet Mars is likely billions of years past, but the thought is as evocative of potential histories as walking the streets of a ghost town or discovering seashells on a mountaintop. But let's return to those holes and that scoop of material. What do they tell us about ourselves? First, I think it tells us much about what we hold to be important, that science clearly matters. It can help us understand our own world better by understanding how our sister planet's fate could have been so different than our own. Beyond that eminently practical application, though, I see a powerful metaphor in our efforts to literally bore into the mystery of what Mars was and how it came to be as it is. I believe that it is not only for practical reasons that we are not content to observe from afar, but instead need to send our avatars to the surface and potentially the caves of a planet to look and smell and touch and drill. We need to get dirt beneath our fingernails, even if those nails belong to our robots. Moreover, it is telling that we pursue a mystery that is as far from home and hearth as is technologically feasible at the moment. Even at the pinnacle of cold calculated science and engineering, we are curious explorers. And what of that process of flying the mission? Despite the end product, the design of a robotic system such as Curiosity is an intensely human process. As I mentioned before, the creation of such a thing is an act of human will. It is only will that can track down the million little details that differentiate a mission like this one from a smoking hole in the surface of Mars, or the tragically inert sculpture littering the landscape. It is will that allows people to work for years on a project that may fail for reasons far beyond their individual control. And will without urgency is likewise nothing. It may be argued that Mars isn't going anywhere, but we are. As we reach for the stars, there is so much to do that every generation must give as much as it can for as long as it can. While individual motivations may vary, I think the will and the urgency for humankind have primarily come from the visionary storytellers and artists. Originally, it may have just been the story of what dangers and treasures lay over the hill or over the sea. Today, however, it's a question of what dangers and treasures lie on the other side of technological and scientific discovery. And that is the territory of science fiction authors. And those authors must also possess will and urgency. The will is expressed in the ability to visualize a reality that could be, learn to communicate that potential reality using the art and craft of storytelling, grab the opportunities such as the one presented through these inspiring contests, and give explorers, scientists, and engineers foolproof job security to make science fiction into fact. Thank you for that vote of future employment. The urgency for authors is expressed in the need to continue to write, injecting vibrancy into our culture by finding new insights and provoking new thoughts. It was the science fiction pioneers and greats who envisioned humans visiting the moon, diving 20,000 leagues under the sea, and traveling to the stars. Humans have been to the moon. A human has gone to the deepest point in the ocean, and humans have taken their first steps towards the stars. So, tell us, writers and artists of the future, what are we going to do next? What will motivate our will and our urgency? Is it something further, different, or more? And how will finding it show us ourselves? The future is in your minds and in your words. Thank you.